The swinging of the door as it closed jingled a sprightly bell. It set the tone of the place immediately, a classy yet cozy atmosphere that was full to bursting with warm and inviting scents, and most everything was some shade of pink or cream. If the owner could have made the green leaves of live plants around the room a delicate baby pink instead, you didn't doubt they would have. The four of you went over and clustered together near the front of the shop. Today's freshly made confections sat in perfectly aligned row inside a glass display. Each had its own paper doily underneath. No other customers were inside at that time, but you weren't alone for more than a minute. The bell had announced your arrival, and the sound drew out someone from the back. They blended in with the store's style so exactly it had to be intentional. Their softly pointed face was painted with expertly applied makeup that could rival the pristine details of the cakes on offer. That was framed by a few strands of shoulder-length pastel pink hair. The rest of it was propped into a fancy updo with floral accessories. As glamorous as the employee was, they weren't too good for a homey apron to protect their pretty clothes from messy behind-the-scenes work that lovely baked treats demanded. A shiny purple button on one strap had their pronouns printed out in black letters. They, them. They greeted the small crowd with a gentle, amiable tone. "Welcome to Sake. Thanks for coming by.
Hi.
My name's Xavier, the head baker, and I own the shop too."
Hey.
"Sup, Xavier?" His reply was familiar to the point of being flippant. Nico wasn't even looking at them when he said it. He leaned lower and began pursuing the daily selections up close. "Hello, Nico. Your patronage is always appreciated." With the personal greetings between those two complete, Xavier looked over the rest of your gang with a friendly smile.
Good to see
"It's
you.
good to see you again, too." Derek's usual conversational skills failed him. He was loath to embarrass another person by pointing out the little fact that they weren't seeing each other again. A total stall in the exchange was avoided thanks to the fact that George didn't have these same reservations. He could speak far more frankly. We've never been here before, only Nicole, though maybe Faye has. I can't speak for her." He raised an eyebrow while glancing your way. He paused his small correction to let you contribute your side concerning the bakery. You shook your head at the possibility of this being a repeat spot for you. As far as you know, Sake didn't even exist the last time you were in the city. "Not me either. I've never seen this place." That's what I thought. You don't know us." Xavier's grin was undaunted. That might have been a customer service skill, but Nicholas, snickering mischievously in the background, gave away that something else was likely the reason for their calm reaction to George's directness. "Your Suarez brothers may not have been all together in my bakery before, but we certainly have already met more than once. Four eyes went wide, and two mouths grimaced at the same time in the same way. Xavier spoke so surely and plainly, Derek and George flipped instantly from viewing them as a stranger to embarrassment over forgetting someone they should have known. And Faye, was it? I think we might be acquainted too. That made you curious. You eagerly waited to find out more. What kind of history did you have with them? Two of the three brothers transparently inspected Xavier up and down, trying to put together how they might have met the mysterious baker who claimed to know them. Meanwhile, the youngest of the set pretended that he was still scrutinizing the desserts. But unless they had jokes hidden in the frosting, Nicholas' highly amused smirk reflected in the glass revealed that he was fully engaged in the conversation happening above them. George tilted his head from one side to the other and crossed his arms. Derek subconsciously scratched the side of his face at the awkward turn this had taken.
Whoa.
Sorry, I'm blanking on who you are. How did we met? Xavier's eyes fluttered closed as they primly straightened their apron.
Don't apologize.
Don't apologize. Nicholas, with his hair clips and wild locks, is very recognizable. He hasn't changed at all. If I only saw one of you as an adult in isolation, I doubt I would have realized who you were either. As adults? That one point jumped out at George so distinctly he spoke it back to Xavier as if he was Nicholas making Derek. Exactly. The last time we saw each other, you were at least 2 feet shorter. Xavier hovered their flattened fingers in front of them like they were resting on a counter roughly around 4 feet high as a visual demonstration. They progressively lifted their hand up until their palm was high enough that it could have sat on top of fully grown George's head if he was closer. Utilizing their tiptoes was necessary for the feat. I've always had an artist's soul, but my medium wasn't always decorative pastries. My first job, straight out of high school, was painting faces at the big boardwalk park.
Whoa.
Derek's face went all light with a flash of recognition. The fingers that had been scraping his skin twitched, then started to searchingly press along the length of his cheeks, as though a painted spider might have suddenly appeared there. George slapped his hand against his forehead. It had all become so obvious to him. The trio of excitable yet well-behaved brothers who'd come by a few times a year were some of my favorite customers. But Xavier quite literally didn't forget about you either, and they shifted your gaze to the rest on you.
Well,
And I'm relatively sure one time the boys brought friends with them, and that one of those friends was you. Oh, you finally got it. That day on the boardwalk had been memorable for many reasons, but embarrassingly, the identity of the artist had slipped through the mental cracks. A tiny chuckle bubbled out. This wasn't even the first time a lack of recollection led to an amusing reunion. You weren't as good as you weren't as good at recognizing faces as Baxter clearly. A huge childlike grin filled out Derek's face. He looked no different than he did all the years ago when you first met Xavier. Massive muscles aside,
I'm
you're
impressed.
spot on. One time Faye and her older sis came with us, and we all stopped by your face painting stall. I can't believe we met again, and like this, in a bakery of all things. It's awesome. Derek resolved to restart the interaction on the right foot, and he finally gave a greeting of his own to Xavier. Hey again, Xavier the artist. The middle brother followed the eldest's example and offered a reprise to his original statement.
Oh,
Oh, okay. Good to see you again too. Small world, Xavier. Xavier was just tickled by the reception. The visit was gonna be worth it for them, even if you walked away without purchasing a single slice of cake. At some point, Nicholas had stopped eyeballing the pastries and had leaned coolly against the counter. He also finally rejoined the conversation instead of existing as an entertained audience member. I told you the owner was cool. Oh, thank you for talking me up, Nicholas. Now that we're all reacquainted, is there anything I can do for you? Nicholas slipped his hands into his pocket, staying totally chill. We'll probably just get a couple of things to go. I want. He paused to squint down over his shoulder at the treats one more time. Get me an eclair and a cup of water too.
Will do.
Will do.
Anything else?
Anything else? They surveyed the other three people in the room as they asked the question and waited for a response. George approached his only little brother at the front display, shooting him a wry smile upon his arrival, but then he quite seriously considered what was available. I'll have a blueberry muffin, the one in the middle, and on the left, my left, it looks like it has the most berries. Xavier gave two quick nods. Their hands were already busy putting together a box for Nichols' selected pastry. Derek, however, stayed back, and his focus went to you rather than the baker or the wares.
You ready?
What are you thinking? I'm gonna pass. I'm not sure. I'll get a better look at them. Cool. You joined the other Suarez brothers and contemplated what, if any, treats to pick out for yourself. Up close, you noticed that there were tiny handwritten signs in front of the options. They declared what flavor each quaint confection was in pretty looping letters. The variety was somewhat limited, but those likely weren't the only things the bakery ever had available. They were simply what was made for that day. You decided you wanted a slice of raspberry lemon cake. You heard Derek come up behind you. You didn't have to look to guess that he was trying to figure out what had caught your eye. You eagerly pointed out the prized dessert.
Nice.
Looks good. Xavier, I'd like to get A raspberry lemon cake. Absolutely. And that's everything? Two packed and prepped boxes were sitting side by side as Xavier reached behind them for a third. Should be. Nicholas and George both gave a thumbs up to confirm that they were all taken care of. The answer caused feigned confusion from Xavier. So, you're not getting what Derek is getting, Nico? That kind of teasing from someone other than another Suarez caught you entirely by surprise, but Nicholas was able to quip back with ease. Maybe I would've, but Derek isn't getting anything. You'd lose out on a sale if I copied that. Good point. You don't need to do that. Hey, why don't you be the one to pick out something for him instead?
Sorry.
No thanks. That's not how this works. It was worth a shot. The two chuckled good-naturedly. Let me ring you up. Those were the magic words to draw Derek fully over to the front. He came to the spot right across from the register. It didn't go unnoticed.
Derek?
You're the only one who didn't get anything. You shouldn't pay. Nico snapped his head around with a look of true offense at what had gone on behind his back. He folded his arms up disapprovingly, catching Derek with his hand in metaphorical cookie jar. Or rather, putting his own cookies in someone else's jar.
What?
What? Derek made a look of box surprise that gave Xavier's response to Nicholas's non-mimicked decision making a run for its money with his cough of played-up disbelief. You can't take away my oldest child privilege of treating my little brothers. And Faye is my girlfriend. Why wouldn't I pick up the tab for her? The middle and the youngest Suarezes shared concerned glances with one another, their brows knit and their frowns sadly. However, their brotherly non-verbal communication gradually softened. Their expressions, their eyes carried the message they needed, and soon they were shrugging in acceptance. Derek gave a winning grin and pulled out his awaiting wallet. He was forever their big brother, after all. You accepted his generosity as well. The treats were paid for, and Xavier carefully passed over the crisp white boxes to their rightful owners. The Sakya logo was printed in, of course, pink ink across the top flaps. They also handed over a cup of water for Nicholas.
Have a wonderful day.
Thank you for your lovely patronage. Have a wonderful day. Derek, George, and Nicholas each gave a cheery goodbye, and began to walk out as a group. You gave a wave and turned to leave with them. Thank you too. Bye. Your group's first stop of the day was completed in a sweetly satisfying way. Everyone got back into the car, same seats as before. No one had even put their seatbelts on before George asked a very reasonable question.
Now what?
What are we doing now? Derek checked the back seat through the mirror. Yeah, what now, Nico? Nicholas crossed his arms behind his head, thoughtfully staring out the window. All eyes stayed on today's decision maker. He considered long and hard in the hot car about how to use his power. In the end, he went for his old default. The teen leaned all the way over and popped his head through the gap between the two front seats. He glanced back and forth between Hugh and Derek with one fuzzy brow arched. What did people do when you were teens?
Oh,
Well,
man.
wait to make us sound ancient. We're 23. Nico wants to do what Derek did. What a surprise. Nicholas rolled his eyes. This was the second time in about 10 minutes he was getting teased for that. You couldn't help it. But he pressed again. I mean it. What was the place to be when you weren't babysitting me and George? Derek tapped a finger against the steering wheel. I remember the mall being super cool when I was still in school, but that started to die out, huh?
What?
The mall? Really? Sparkles began to twinkle in Nicholas's eye like a twilight sky. George shrugged a single shoulder, buckling himself in for the ride. I've only ever gone there with Mom to get some new clothes. I don't remember it being better than any other store, but if that's what Nico wants to do, I don't mind.
Let's go!
Let's go. Nicholas launched himself backwards and bounced in his seat. He stayed still just long enough to lock his seatbelt into place.
Let's
The
get to
mall
it.
it is. 2 more clicks followed as you and Derek put your seatbelts on. Derek pulled out and you were on the road once more. The drive was spent with Derek trying and failing to remember all the stores that used to be in the county mall. He listed several off, but he had no idea how many were still open in the year of 2021, or if they were even real store names, or he was mixing the words up. His little brothers revealed in the small lab-inducing, floundering explanation of the magical mall of his youth. They took bets on how many of the shops they'd actually see when they got there. George guessed only about 3 of them would be there if they ever existed. Nicholas declared that every single one would be there, even the ones that definitely sounded made up. Derek, reasonable as always, went down the middle with his own recollection and guessed that you'd be able to find half of them there. You agreed with Derek. Derek assured you that you'd made a wise decision. You felt good about your odds. When you rode into the county mall's expansive parking lot, Derek was able to get a parking spot without any trouble. There were rows and rows of cracked and oil-stained slots with only a single car or 2 there already. Just as Derek thought, the location had lost most of its popularity as the years went on. It was at least convenient for your needs. It was probably the only place in the city where the parking wasn't jam-packed. The 4 of you filled out of the car, crossed the lot, and passed through the towering front doors. The interior of the place had a slight uncanny feeling. You'd never stepped foot there before, and the massive scale paired with total lack of people filling it made you feel as if you weren't supposed to be in that place. Well, here we are. Take it in. Wow. You wandered up and down the wide, mostly empty halls, pointing out the stores Derek had named or almost named. Along the way, it was a game of I Spy. The younger brothers were quite entertained just by that. They led the pack to get the first look at whatever was ahead. Derek and you lingered behind and gave appropriate reactions whenever one of the big boys shouted out a store name that matched Derek's recollection or one that he had failed to note. The two laughed and waved back at you while you cheered and booed up at them. When you neared the end of the aisle, there was a break in the store names that could be announced. Derek used that moment to whisper a joking remark. It feels like we're babysitting again, huh? Yep, our precious big babies. He winked and picked up the pace. Nico and George had drifted further away from his watchful eyes, and the responsible babysitter couldn't let that happen. Your group arrived at the crossroads of the malls, where three separate halls of stores converged in the middle. Without the boisterousness of Nicholas and George to fill the space, the sounds of footsteps echoed so much louder. Derek's expression twisted and drooped bittersweetly, looking at the space. Being here now, it's not the same. Then his focus came onto his brothers, and his face snapped back to its usual optimism. So, do you guys actually want to go into any of those stores? His little brothers both turned around to stare wide-eyed at their elder. Nicholas and George were genuinely taken by surprise at the idea of behaving as regular customers. They were visiting as sightseers of an archaeological site from the times long gone. Nico blinked rapidly to hydrate his eyeballs after keeping them open for so long. Then his expression slipped into an easy grin, and he put his hands on his hips. Yeah, I'll try. He scanned the rows and rows of stores with new, refreshed eyes. A target was quickly acquired. Nicholas pointed an outstretched hand at a black-walled skater shop. I want to look at that one. George had come to face an entirely different direction. He mowed over the suggestions silently and was gazing with consideration at a bookstore with huge glass windows that showed off not only the books on sale, but other wares like board games and figurines. The unspoken difference of opinion didn't escape Derek's attention. He spoke with full authority, truly dusting off those old babysitter instincts. Hey, this doesn't mean I want you guys going off on your own. You're not little kids, but we're here to be together, and there's time to see more than one place. We'll take turns. Okay. Automatically and obediently, George and Nicholas replied in unison. They were good kids. Is there some place you or Faye want to go to? Derek didn't hesitate. He jerked a thumb over his shoulder at the video game shop.
Oh yeah.
That's what I want to check out. Faye? All three Suarez brothers watched you questioningly, each wondering the same thing. It was hard to say without knowing for sure what the options even were. But luckily, the center section had a handy 8-foot tall map that was emblazoned with easy to follow categories and list of store names. It was veritable cheat sheet for their little game, and you were glad at the two younger brothers found stores they wanted without needing to peek at it. There was nothing wrong with you having some extra insight, though, and you read over everything laid out. A significant amount of stores sold food. You just left a bakery and should be eating with the rest of the family pretty soon. So you decided against all of those. Beyond that, there were tons of chain stores with very standard types of products. Those three are good with me. Cool. Derek nodded his head formally but paired it with a cheery grin.
Come
We've got a
on.
plan. The group checked out the game store. Derek confidently strolled into the local game shop with his younger brother flanking his sides. The set of three glanced around eagerly, then split off in different directions around the single room. You followed Derek towards the right wall while Jordan Nicholas went to the back corners. He bounced up and down on the pads of feet like a kid in a candy store. We should totally get something. Sure. What console do you have? None. Not right now, at least. The conspiratorial gleam shone in his shifting green eyes. While watching his back, Derek inclined his face closer to you, put a hand to his side of his face, and shared his real plan with you. I'm gonna convince Nico to let us borrow his Switch. I know he got one last year just for himself, but what I don't know is all the games he owns.
Awesome.
That's no longer a problem now. We can pick out whatever we want here. Something that we could play together. Oh, we'll need an extra controller too. He chattered along with poorly restrained excitement, smiling sweetly at you as he did. Derek could have gotten a digital download of a game instead, but there was no need to spoil the fun of picking it out at the real store. We could find the party game. Alright. The two of you worked as a team to scour through the library of Switch games for the right genre with multiplayer capability. A few contenders appeared, and you had a mini group huddle to come to a final decision. Derek held the case high like the prize it was and marched towards the register. You plucked a refurbished controller off the wall and followed after him. Derek clapped the case against the counter with as much gumption as someone playing a winning hand in cards. He chuckled at his own dramatics when you had to awkwardly slide the controller he'd forgotten alongside the game. Thanks, Faye. No problem. Our multiplayer excursion would have been pretty short without it. Nicholas couldn't go too long without checking in on his big brother's activity. He spotted the two of you at the register. Seeing it was a game for the Switch, he nodded happily. The teen was blissfully unaware of Derek's true intentions with buying for that console. Derek played it cool and paid for the game and controller. He didn't even look at his little brother until the deal was done and he'd secured the bag. Then Derek flipped around confidently.
Nice work.
Mission accomplished. Let's hit the next shop. Everyone went to the bookstore. The four of you filed into the large bookstore and began to drift around. It was one of the most spacious shops in the mall. George went down the very first aisle of books, and he walked with him. He was focused enough that he had to be searching for something, but there was no way to tell what was on his mind. You quietly browsed alongside him. The comfortable silence was ended for a brief minute thanks to a question from George. How's Liz doing? Oh, she's great. The two of you kept pursuing like nothing happened, but his smile had grown just a bit more. The books didn't hold Nicholas or Derek's attention as long as George's. While he remained in one section and considered each title on the shelf, his brother skipped along from row to row after giving only cursory glances to the specifics. With a bit of distance between himself and his family, George took the opportunity to have a more private conversation with you personally. His quiet voice and being walled in by books made you feel as if you were in a library rather than a mall.
I'm glad.
I'm glad you chose to date Derek. That floored you. It wasn't that you found it unbelievable, but you'd hope only for support in you and Derek's decision, not active encouragement for it. And the fact that he didn't only think it, but was willing to admit it directly to you. You were going to need a minute. He peeked at you out of the corner of his eyes. He knew exactly the kind of emotional bomb he'd set off. I think a lot of kids imagine their favorite babysitter never going away, even when they grow up. But for me, it's not merely a concept, it's real. I'm the one who's lucky to get to stay a part of the group. He simply returned to shopping, as happy as could be. You felt much lighter yourself. George ended up finding a newly released thriller that sounded interesting. He purchased it and went to find his siblings. Nicholas and George had holed it up in the graphic novel and manga aisle. They looked up as you and George approached. They grinned after seeing the bag under George's arm. I'm finished. Thanks for coming with me. And what now? You all headed into the skater shop. Your group crowded into Nicholas's choice of store, Aggressive rock music played within the graphic tee over covered walls. It was small and cramped, making it impossible for four people to navigate between the displays together. Derek and George were filtered through the narrow spaces on one side of the shop, and you and Nicholas were on the other. The the claustrophobic atmosphere didn't faze Nickel. He lackadaisically surveyed the scene, stopping only when he came across a shelf of slip-on shoes. Nicholas lifted a checkered shoe off the rack and weighed it in his hands. By an intrigued rise of his brows, you got the impression he'd be in that spot for a while. You stayed quiet, not wanting to interrupt. He tilted his head back and forth, his long strands of hair swaying gently across his face. I look good in this, right? Definitely. Yeah, too bad it's $80. That's not gonna be happening. Oh, good point. Nichols' usual energy faded from him, and the shoe became a lead weight in his hand. It hung low at his side as he stared blankly at the wall. With a sigh, he mustered enough motivation to limply place the shoe back on the rack. Is everything alright? Listlessness chilled into defensiveness at your concern. Nicholas crossed his bare arms tightly against his chest. He wouldn't look at you. That was enough of a hint to realize this wasn't about the shoes. The elephant that could in no way fit in the room was reeling its ugly trunk. Come on, we've got to talk about this sometime. You're not happy that Derek started dating me, right? From what you could see of his half-turned face, his expression would be hard to read even if he wasn't hiding it. The expression was conflicted, not quite anger, not quite sadness, not quite fear, and under all of it was a layer of guilt. You gave him space, knowing you'd already prodded enough. When he spoke, it was slow, unsure. He was processing what he was thinking as he was vocalizing it. I didn't want you to break my brother's heart, since he obviously likes you, and I don't wish that Derek never met anybody who he liked. And I like you too. I thought we were friends, like you were friends with him. Nicholas worked himself up more and more at confronting this part of his feelings, but his turmoil quickly fizzled out.
I don't know.
But I don't know. Now that you're really together, you're probably gonna stay together, and I don't know. He drooped like a match that had a bucket of water dumped over it. I've never had a real girlfriend, and Derek could be going off to make his own family and who knows how soon. I understand. It's sad to think someone is moving on without you. This time your words softened his demeanor instead of sharpening it. He wasn't all better. It was still a concern, but you could see hope and trust in his gaze. Even though it wasn't today, you felt confident that someday he would be truly happy about the shift in relationship dynamics that had occurred. Nicholas gestured with his hands for you to come as he turned away more. He walked back to the center of the tiny space. From there, it was easy for his older brothers to spot him. Derek and George waded through the merchandise, pressing in from all sides, almost knocking a few things over on the way. It was a rough place to be for a couple of large adult men, but they didn't have to worry about that for long. "I'm done with this," he announced with a shrug. Nico hadn't got anything. He'd only wanted to satisfy his curiosity.
Okay.
Okay. We've have we've had some good stops, but it's getting late. We've gotta go home now. Nicholas Genially accepted the end of the trip. "Fine, thanks for bringing us to this old place." A warmth came to his voice as he concluded his statement. "It's cool that we got to hang out together." The sweetness brought a huge grin to Derek's face. He placed a hand on Nicholas's head, as he'd done for many years. "I'm glad we did this too." Nicholas beamed at those words. The only thing better than having fun with his family was knowing that his family was having fun with him as well. In high spirits, he slipped out from under Derek's hold and threw an arm over George's shoulder. The middle brother linked his own hand to another around Nico. The affection between all three had only grown stronger as the years had gone by. Everyone ambled towards the exit, feeling fulfilled. As you approached the door, George began to speak. Did anyone else notice Derek and Faye won the bet? About half the stores he mentioned were real and there. Yeah, that's right. Nicholas stuck out a peace sign and cheered victoriously despite having not won himself. Something even better had happened. Obviously, if Derek wasn't right about all the stores he talked about, then he'd be right about how many stores he'd be right about. Derek shook his head with a laugh at exaggerated descriptions from his biggest fan.
Thanks.
"Thanks for believing in me. Always, bro." You happily watched the brothers. It was always nice time when you all got together. All the loose threads that had been tied up, and you left them all behind. You got back into the shotgun seat and strapped in for the drive back to the Suarez home. When everyone was set, you were on your way. It was a peaceful ride, mostly quiet. After the long excursion out, a rest was in order, but it only lasted for the first leg of the trip. Eventually, the soothing rumble of the car was harmonized with the gentle sounds of Nicholas humming joyfully to himself, and only a second later, that was followed by a heart-wrenching gasp. The eldest brother instantly stiffened in his seat.
What's up?
"What's up, Nicholas?"
No!
"My eclair. It's disgusting." The eclair? He ran that piece of information through his mind. The facts of the situation clicked into place. It melted. Nicholas whined at the tragedy of it all. Derek was right again, and he let out a nervous chuckle.
Never would have guessed that.
What did you think would happen? It's a cream-filled dessert been sitting for hours in a locked car during summer. I didn't think anything, it just happened.
That's a bummer.
I figured you were gonna eat it on the way to the mall. I forgot about it. There were plenty of questions and comments coming from both his brothers, but there was little Nicholas could say in defense. You twisted in your seat to check the youngest. The sight was pitiful. He was slouched in his seat, gazing down into his box, full of regrets. The suffering couldn't be ignored. George was compelled to offer a solution to protect Nico from the consequences of his actions. You can have mine. It's still fine. It's a little soft, but warm muffins are good. Nicholas tucked his knees up and gripped the box more tightly. A new dessert sadly couldn't undo what'd been done. I don't want that. I ruined mine. It's inedible. The solemnness brewing in the back seat was cracked by a bold declaration from the very front. I doubt that. Pass it over. That snapped Nicholas to attention. He was baffled by his brother. It wasn't hard to imagine why. Derek didn't enjoy treats on a normal day, and that one in particular was in a sorry state. But it was even easier to guess the reason. All of that didn't matter. Derek could stomach anything for his baby brother. He continued to coax Nicholas.
I see how
I was always gonna try to get some of your dessert. That's the reason I didn't get That's the reason I didn't get my own. If you're not having any, that makes it even better for my plans. Nicholas wasn't a 6-year-old anymore. He knew a placating stunt when he saw one. He aimed at Derek in pouty resistance, trying to brush the whole attempt off. Yet Derek had grown in that same time as well. He hadn't lost his knack at tending to his baby brothers. Even if it took more effort, he pretended to be oblivious to the rejection. Hey, could you get me the box? There was a groan and sliding shuffle sound. Nicholas had shoved the box through the openings between the driver's seat and shotgun. Just like the guessing game, he wasn't gonna win this. Okay. You took the sake box from Nicholas and brought it up to the front. The lid was already open and you caught a peek at the eclair bottle. It was only about half as tall as it had been originally. The structure of the steel tree had collapsed in on itself. The paper doily underneath was entirely coated in liquefied chocolate frosting and pastry cream. You held the eclair out towards Derek. Your fingers sunk into the sides of the overheated pastry with no resistance. They were immediately covered in sticky ooze bleeding out from the inside. There was no way to do what you wanted to do without getting messy, but it was the path you'd chosen. You made your best attempt to avoid having the car suffer the same fate as your hands as you inched the eclair towards Derek's head. Well, the unexpected convection floating in Derek's peripheral caught him entirely off guard. He gripped the wheel harder while enthralled whispers could be heard from the two audience members. You were sure he might have had something to say at your stunt, but he kept himself composed and casual. He was driving, and his little brothers were watching. Thanks, Faye. That makes it easier. His eyes stayed on the road, and he turned his head ever so slightly to reach that treat. He didn't waste any time taking as large a bite as he could manage. He barely seemed to chew it before he swallowed. It isn't bad, not too sweet. I'm honestly impressed. Xavier is a damn good baker. You took a bite on it. You took a bite, You took a bite of your own. Derek made it seem tempting. You managed to get a satisfying squishy chomp. The texture was miles away from what an eclair should be, but it still had very good flavor. Derek wasn't kidding when he praised Xavier's skills. Hey, that's mine! Nicholas shouted instinctively. You smiled at him with your grubby face and waited for the shock to wear off. He eventually remembered that he didn't want the eclair. A rueful smile pulled at the corners of his mouth. Feeling a little fuller and much more satisfied, you set what remained of the eclair down and returned the dessert to its original owner. He poked at the remnants inside. After all that, he couldn't help himself and scooped some of the mushy mess out and gave it an exploratory taste. Nickel grimaced as soon as it hit his tongue, and he let out a heavy sigh when he swallowed it down. It's pretty gross. As true as that was, there was a breathy chuckle threaded into his words. Not so long ago, he'd been as droopy as the eclair itself. Now he was starting to perk up. There was one person left who didn't take part in the event. He stayed quiet no longer. Could I try it too? Totally. It's all yours. The box was unceremoniously dumped onto George's leg. He awkwardly grabbed it to keep it from falling onto the floor. George gave a snort.
Thanks.
Don't mention it. There was a decent amount left. It was quite lengthy type of confection. For Nicholas, it would have been at least 2 bites. George, however, was able to stuff the remainder of the confection into his face, and just like that, it was gone. Nicholas barked louder and clearer than before. Well, I did say it was yours. Thanks to team efforts, none of the eclair went to waste. No soggy clouds remained over anyone's head. You decided not to eat your treat after all. Your raspberry lemon cake had to be just as annihilated by the heat as Nichols' eclair was. The trip home came with good moods all around, and soon you'd reach your destination. Nicholas and George jumped out of the car right away. Derek took a second to gather up the gift he'd gotten for his father and the card for Mr. Holden. You made sure you got your own stuff too before following after the boys.